Hello and welcome to Empire of Wargames. My name is Deeplesh and today we are talking about the last deck from the Universes Beyond collection. We are talking about the forces of the Imperium and we are going to go over all the commanders and we are going to go over a couple of cards that caught my attention as well. If you enjoy the content, consider leaving a thumbs up and subscribing, as well as checking the links down in the description below if you want to support what I do. Alright, let's get into the video. So all in all, I would say that the first impression of the forces of the Imperium deck were very positive. We had the outlook that we are going to get a lot of sub-factions and factions from the Imperium and not just Space Marines. Inquisitor Greyfax was an interesting face commander with some cool mechanics, not overpowered but interesting enough to, consider building a deck around or updating her deck. And yeah, generally speaking, this deck was probably the most positively received out of all the four of them, whenever we just have seen the face card and received a couple of information from the design team. Now when we look at Inquisitor Greyfax real quick, she's 1 generic mana, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black, a legendary creature human Inquisitor with 3/3, and she has Vigilance, an ability that is called Unquestionable Wisdom, which grants other creatures you control +1/+0, and they have Vigilance. And the second ability she has is called Hunt for Heresy, which says pay 1 generic mana and tap target creature an opponent controls, and then investigate. So she offers a lot. She herself has Vigilance, which invites you to attack with her whenever you play with her, unless obviously all three of your opponents have stronger creatures, but other creatures you control gain +1/+0 and have Vigilance as well, and there is no limiter on this one. So any kind of creature gets +1/+0 and has Vigilance. So you could technically use her for any kind of deck, and it doesn't have to be a Warhammer deck, or it doesn't have to be a Space Marine or Inquisitor deck. You can use her for everything, and I think that's what makes her so cool. Her Hunt for Heresy ability is a little bit limiting, but considering she has Vigilance, it allows her to be a little bit aggressive, and then before the last player, before you, ends their turn, you can then tap her and investigate, which is definitely an okay ability to have. The other foil commander you're going to get from this specific deck is Lazarios Coil. He is the Chapter Master of the Ultramarines, and he costs 2 generic mana, 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black. He's a legendary creature, Astartes Warrior, and he's a 3/5 with double strike, with an ability called Master Tactician, which reads, whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Note that this doesn't say per turn or whatever, there's no limiter on this one, so you're going to draw a lot of cards. And then we have the ability Chapter Master, which reads, pay 6 generic mana, create 2/2/2 white Astartes Warrior creature tokens with Vigilance. So he is basically making use of himself and his own abilities. You're going to play him for 5, and if you don't have any 6-drop or anything relevant to play on the next turn, you can then create 2/2/2 white Astartes Warrior creature tokens with Vigilance and then draw cards, which is amazing. He himself is a 3/5 buddy with double strike, which is always great. He's a good target to buff and to improve the stats, because double strike really lends itself to getting improved via just generic stat buffs. All in all, I think Lazarios Coil is probably one of the best commanders out of all 4 decks. I think this one is going to see a lot of play. I don't know how competitive he's going to be, but I'm fairly certain he's going to be in the upper ranges of kind of, I don't know, if you take the 1 to 10 range of deck strength, I think he's going to make it up to a 7 or an 8. Now real quick, as far as flavor goes, I think this one fits Lazarios Coil very well. One thing I noticed is that he is bald. I'm not up to date on his lore, like 100%, but usually he's depicted with white hair. That's not the case here on this card, unless I'm blind. And a lot of people expected Roboute Guilliman to appear on a card, which is not the case. Roboute Guilliman is not in this deck, not on the card, and he's not part of the Forces of Imperium deck, which is very, very surprising. Instead, we are getting the Chapter Master of the Ultramarines, which, yeah, is just a surprising thing, and I wanted to note that. Next up, we are going to talk about the other potential commanders from this deck. First up, we have Inquisitoreisenhorn. He's a 2 generic mana, 1 blue, 1 black Dimir commander. He's a legendary creature human Inquisitor with a 2/3 stat line. His first ability reads, you may reveal the first card you draw each turn as you draw it. Whenever you reveal an instant or a sorcery card this way, create Cherubael, a legendary 4/4 black demon creature token with flying. The second ability reads, whenever Inquisitoreisenhorn deals combat damage to a player, investigate that many times. So he himself is also a target to buffing, because the stronger he is, the more you get to investigate. And his first ability invites the deck to have a lot of instant and sorcery cards, maybe combat tricks, it depends. I'm not sure how many combat tricks Dimir is going to have. I know black has some, blue a little bit less so, more debuffs for the enemy, but having a 4/4 black demon creature token with flying just for revealing an instant or sorcery card is definitely a great thing. Please keep in mind that this is obviously a legendary or named token, so you can't have multiple of them unless you kind of cheat the system with whatever cards you have available to you. But generally speaking, you're going to have one, and you're probably going to run this into the first enemy you have. And when he dies, you're probably just going to generate the next one. So Inquisitoreisenhorn, very interesting playstyle for a Dimir kind of deck, and I'm curious to see what people come up with. Next up, we are going to talk about Kommissar Severina Rain. She costs 1 generic mana, 1 white and 1 black. She's a legendary creature human soldier, and she has a 2/2 stat line. Leading from the front reads, whenever Kommissar Severina Rain attacks, each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. Her other ability, Summary Execution, reads 2 generic mana, sacrifice another creature, and then you gain 2 life and draw a card. So she is lore-wise and fluff-wise, and just from a context perspective of Warhammer and Commissars, this is the perfect card for that. Because they are leading from the front, they are attacking, they are right there on the battlefield, and, you know, if you're a guardsman and you don't listen to your Commissar, she's going to execute you. Or he, depending. And I think this is a perfect card lore-wise, and I think this could make a great commander for this specific Orzhov kind of color theme. So yeah, I think she's going to see a lot of play as well. I'm not sure how high her power level is going to go. I think she's going to be a little bit more limited due to her abilities really being kind of prone to board wipes and that kind of stuff. But white has a lot of protection these days, so we'll have to wait and see. Other than that, yeah, just from a story and kind of context perspective, this is probably the perfect Commissar card. Next up, we have Celestine, the Living Saint. She costs 4 generic mana and 1 white. She's a legendary creature, human warrior, and she has a 3/4 stat line. She is flying and lifelink, and her ability Healing Tears reads, at the beginning of your end step, return target creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. Really interesting commander. I can see a lot of people kind of brewing around her, especially because mono white is kind of an underdog color. She herself has lifelink, and she kind of supports herself because she has evasion as well. Now, one thing that is missing, and Pleasant Kenobi, I'm going to link his channel and this specific video in the pinned comment, has also noted that Celestine the Living Saint has the ability to resurrect herself, and having some kind of ability to, you know, make her resurrect herself and then kind of be put into exile or something would have been very, very fitting. But it is what it is. She can resurrect other creatures, which is just as good. Next up, we have Lazarios Coil, a card I personally don't understand at all. This guy costs 2 generic mana, 1 white and 1 blue. He's a legendary artifact creature human, and he has a 2/4 stat line. The first ability, called Ultima Founding, reads tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, and then create 2/2/2 white Astartes Warrior creature tokens with vigilance. This one makes sense. He is kind of the father of the Ultima Founding. He created the new Primaris Marines, so this ability makes sense from a lore perspective, and it's also a good ability that is not very difficult to understand. But the other ability, Master of the Machines, reads tap X untapped creatures you control, and then look at the top X cards from your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So when it comes to not understanding this card, I personally just don't see how this is a good commander. It is relatively easy to understand from a technical perspective, but just looking at this card like from face value and understanding if this is a high power card is kind of a little bit difficult. I think this guy seems very, very weak at least from my perspective. But I'm curious to see what people think about him and if people try him and give him a chance as a kind of face commander or not, or if he's just going to be part of the 99 in a blue and white kind of artifact deck. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I think this card is a little bit weird. At first glance, a little bit underpowered, but I've obviously not played with any of these decks or any of these cards yet. And last but not least, we have Nayam Shai Murat. She costs 2 generic mana, 1 white, 1 black. She's a legendary creature human rogue, and she is a 3/3. Her ability Rogue Trader reads, whenever Nayam Shai Murat deals combat damage to a player, you may have that player return target permanent card from their graveyard to their hand. If you do, that player chooses a permanent card in your graveyard, then you put it onto the battlefield under your control. So this is a Rogue Trader. She basically makes a trade with someone. She deals combat damage to, and it usually ends up being better for you. And this is a very interesting card. This is more of a kind of politic card where you kind of, make deals with someone at the table or with other players, and you try to figure out what is in your graveyard, and you basically will have a lot of cards, if you build around her, that are going to exile cards from your graveyard just so you can curate what is in there and what is not. Very interesting ability. I can see a lot of people who are just playing non-competitively or not very strong decks playing her as a commander, because I think her ability is going to be a lot of fun at the table. Now that we've gone over all the commanders, at least I hope I did, let's go over all the other cards that caught my attention. First up, there is the Golden Throne, with one of the most iconic artworks in Warhammer 40k history. The Golden Throne costs 4 generic mana, it's a legendary artifact, and it reads Arcane Life Support. If you would lose the game, instead exile the Golden Throne and your life total becomes 1. Second ability, 1,000 souls die every day, says tap, sacrifice a creature, add 3 mana in any combination of any color. So this one is very, very strong. Sacrifice outlets are always popular, always strong. Admittedly, you have to tap this specific artifact, but thankfully a lot of artifacts, a lot of decks built around these kind of cards, they are built to go infinite. You know you can untap this thing and you can do it a lot of times. So yeah, you can generate a lot of mana with this one, and it protects you from losing the game. I can see this card actually being played in competitive commander decks, and I'm very excited to see what people do with this, but it seems to be a really, really strong card that is going to make it into every deck that has anything to do with sacrificing things, even if it's a more casual deck. Next, I wanted to really quickly mention that there is a reprint of Skull Clamp in this deck as a kind of servo skull, which is a really cool card. Also a little bit of a more expensive card. I think it costs around $6. So it is a welcome reprint, and it looks really, really cool with the artwork. Other than that, we have a Vexilus Predator, who is a custodian, basically the top echelon of Imperial units, handcrafted by the Emperor himself. And this guy costs 3 generic, 1 white. He's a creature Custodes warrior and has a stat line of 3/4. He has flash and vigilance and an ability called Aegis of the Emperor. This reads, commanders you control have protection from everything. And this is really good, because if you can make this particular Vexilus Predator hexproof or anything, it is going to be very, very annoying to remove your commander. And as we know, commanders are usually the cards you play around, and they usually get removed a lot. And having a card that protects your commander from everything is really, really good. The only thing it doesn't protect it from is kind of board wipes and non-targeted stuff, but it is what it is. I think the Vexilus Predator is a really good white card, and it's going to be a staple in a lot of decks that really rely on your commander being out. The next 2 cards I wanted to talk about are the Zakarian Infiltrator and the Assault Intercessor. The Zakarian Infiltrator is a 3 mana, 2 generic 1 blue artifact creature human soldier with a 1/2 stat line, with flash, with squad 2, which basically means you can play this card, pay the squad cost, and you gain another token that is this exact creature. So if you pay 5 mana, you get 2 of these. If you pay 7 mana, you get 3 of these, and so on. And then the last ability reads, when Zakarian Infiltrator enters the battlefield, draw a card. So if you pay enough mana, this card is going to draw you a lot of cards. and it is amazing because it has also flash, so it has also defensive purposes, and is all around just an amazing card that is probably a little bit undervalued even still. I think a lot of people are talking about the Zakarian Infiltrators, but I think this card is going to see a lot of play, especially in more kind of CEDH targeted decks. The other card is the Assault Intercessor, and it's probably the last card I'm going to talk about here. He is a 1 generic mana, white and black, a creature Astartes warrior with a 3/2 stat line, first strike menace, and ability Chainsword, which reads, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. That is a very kind of odd sort of ability. There are a lot of them around, but a 3/2 body is really good. First strike and menace is also really annoying. And yeah, it's just an amazing card that is probably going to see a lot of play in most odds of decks, or just decks that have white and black in them, that kind of kill opponent creatures and are very offensive. And yeah, it's just going to cost your opponent a lot of life to defend. And that is a really good effect to have. So yeah, all in all, there are a lot of great cards in this deck. I, funnily enough, think that the Necron deck is probably the best one out of them, just from purely seeing all of the cards. But the Forces of the Imperium deck seems to be very interesting as well. I'm glad to see a lot of Adeptus Mechanicus, at least one Custodes card. There are some Space Marines in there, some Dreadnoughts, a little bit of the Inquisition, and more. I'm glad to see all of them around. Now, as I said, Guilliman was not in this particular deck, so it is very well possible that we are going to get a secret lair with Guilliman in there, or we are possibly going to get more decks in the future. If these are going to sell well, I think they said in multiple articles that they are definitely open to releasing more of them, but that could be PR talk, who knows. I would be happy to see more of them because after reviewing all of them, after reading through all the cards, it is evident to me that Wizards of the Coast sat down and really tried to either talk to GW and make sure that everything is coherent with their lore, or they really sat down, read a lot, and figured out how to design cards that really fit the theme of a specific unit, of the lore, or of a specific event that took place in Warhammer 40,000. So I'm really glad that Wizards of the Coast and the designers for Magic the Gathering really went all the way when it comes to representing this specific IP. I myself am a big Warhammer 40k player, so my entire channel is revolved around this. So I'm very happy to see that all of this is happening here, and it's a very positive product, at least from my perspective right now. All right, I hope this was insightful. If you have anything to add, any favorite cards, any builds for any specific commanders I've gone over, please drop them in the comments below. Other than that, I hope to see you in the next video, and yeah, bye bye.